The morning mist clung to the Powder River like a shroud when Chief Tahatan spotted something pale drifting in the shallows. At first, he thought it was a dead deer, but as his horse picked its way down the rocky bank, his breath caught. It was a woman, face down in the water, her tattered dress billowing around her like wilted petals. Tahatan had been chief of his Lakota band for 12 winters. He had seen death in many forms. Battle, disease, starvation during the harsh months when buffalo were scarce. But something about this broken figure stirred an unfamiliar urgency in his chest. He dismounted and waded into the cold water without hesitation. She was heavier than she looked, waterlogged and limp. He pulled her onto the bank and turned her over, immediately pressing on her chest the way the tribe's healer had taught him seasons ago. Water poured from her mouth. Her skin was ice cold, lips blue, but when he pressed his ear to her chest, he heard it. A faint, stubborn heartbeat. "You will not die today," he muttered, working faster. She coughed suddenly, violently, expelling more water. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and terrified, before closing again. Tahatan wrapped her in his buffalo robe and lifted her onto his horse. She was white, he could see that now, with hair the color of winter wheat and scars crisscrossing her exposed arms like a map of suffering. The ride back to camp was swift. His warriors noticed immediately, emerging from their lodges with weapons drawn until they recognized their chief. Questions flew at him in rapid Lakota, but Tahatan ignored them all, carrying the woman directly to the healer's teepee. Old Winona looked up from grinding herbs, her weathered face registering surprise. She had delivered Tahatan into the world 40 winters ago and had earned the right to question him without ceremony. "What have you brought me, Tahatan?" "A woman who refuses to die," he replied, laying her gently on the furs. She was in the river. Winona's practiced hands moved over the stranger, checking her breathing, examining the bruises that darkened her skin like storm clouds. What she found made her mouth tighten into a grim line. "This woman has been beaten. Badly. And recently." She pointed to marks around the woman's wrists. "She was bound. These wounds are fresh, perhaps 2 days old." Tahatan's jaw clenched. "Will she live?" "Perhaps. Her spirit is fighting, but her body has endured much." Winona began mixing a poultice. "The question is whether she will want to live when she wakes. Women who end up in rivers rarely fall by accident." The truth of those words settled over Tahatan like a heavy blanket. He had pulled bodies from the Powder River before, people who had chosen the water's embrace over whatever demons chased them. But something told him this woman's story was different. The way she had fought back to consciousness, even for that brief moment, suggested a survivor, not someone seeking death. "I will stay," Tahatan announced. Winona raised an eyebrow. "You have a council meeting. The matter of winter hunting grounds. They can wait." The old healer smiled knowingly but said nothing, returning her attention to their patient. She worked for hours, treating wounds, warming the woman's body, forcing medicinal tea between her cracked lips. Tahatan sat cross-legged by the fire, watching silently. As the sun climbed higher, the woman began to stir. Her movements were jerky, panicked. When her eyes opened fully, they darted around the unfamiliar teepee like a trapped animal seeking escape. She tried to speak, but only a rasping sound emerged. "You are safe," Tahatan said in English, keeping his voice low and steady. His words were careful, learned from years of trading with white settlers. "No one will hurt you here." The woman's gaze locked onto his face. He saw raw terror there, but also something else. A desperate, fragile hope. She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her, and she collapsed back onto the furs. "Rest," Tahatan urged. "You have survived the river. Now you must survive your wounds. When you are stronger, you will tell us your name." She stared at him for a long moment, tears sliding down her temples. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke her first words. "Sarah. My name is Sarah. And I can never go back." Sarah's recovery was slow and painful. For 3 days, she drifted in and out of fever dreams, crying out in a language that made Winona's face darken with understanding even though she spoke no English. The words were pleas, apologies, desperate promises to do better. Tahatan found himself drawn to the healer's teepee more often than he cared to admit. He told himself it was merely concern for a stranger under his protection, but the truth ran deeper. Something about Sarah's fierce grip on life, despite everything trying to pull her under, resonated with a part of him he had thought long buried. On the 4th morning, Sarah's fever finally broke. She woke clear-eyed and frightened, taking in her surroundings with the wariness of someone who had learned that kindness often came with hidden costs. Winona sat beside her, offering water and soft words in Lakota that Sarah couldn't understand but seemed to find comforting anyway. When Tahatan entered, Sarah flinched. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, and it told him everything he needed to know about the man she had fled. He stopped in the doorway, making himself as unthreatening as possible. "You are better," he observed in English. Sarah nodded slowly, pulling the buffalo robe tighter around her shoulders. "You saved my life. I should thank you, but I'm not certain you did me any favors." Her honesty surprised him. Most people hid behind gratitude and pleasantries. "You wish you had died?" "I wish I had never been born," Sarah replied, her voice flat. "But since I failed at drowning, I suppose I must live with the consequences." Winona clicked her tongue disapprovingly, though she couldn't understand the words. She knew despair when she heard it. She pressed a bowl of broth into Sarah's hands with a stern look that transcended language. Sarah took the bowl obediently, sipping slowly. Her hands shook, but she managed. After a moment, she looked at Tahatan again, really looked at him. "Why did you help me? I'm nothing to you. Less than nothing. I'm white." Tahatan settled himself by the fire, maintaining a respectful distance. "The river gives and the river takes. That morning, it gave. I would be a fool to refuse such a gift." "Gift?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "I'm a used-up piece of nothing. My husband made sure I understood that every day for 5 years. When I finally found the courage to run, he hunted me like an animal. When he caught me, he tied my hands and threw me in the river himself. Said it was kinder than what he'd do if he had to look at my worthless face another day longer." The words poured out of her like poison from a wound, and Tahatan let them come. Winona continued her work, understanding enough from tone and gesture to know that this woman was releasing something dark and festering. "Your husband is a coward," Tahatan said simply when she finished. "Only weak men hurt women. Only the weakest kill them." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He told me I deserved it. That I was lazy and stupid and cold. That no other man would ever want me. Maybe he was right. He was wrong." Tahatan's voice carried such certainty that Sarah looked up sharply. "A man who must tear down his woman to feel tall is not a man at all. He is a frightened child breaking toys because he cannot create anything himself." Something shifted in Sarah's expression. 4 years, her husband had been her only mirror, reflecting back an image of worthlessness until she believed it was truth. Now, this Lakota chief looked at her with clear eyes and saw something different. It was terrifying and exhilarating at once. "What happens to me now?" she asked quietly. "You heal," Tahatan replied. "When you are strong, you decide. Stay or go. We will not hold you, and we will not send you away. You are free here, Sarah." Perhaps for the first time. The word free struck her like a physical blow. She had forgotten what it meant. Had perhaps never truly known. Tears spilled over, silent and unstoppable, and Winona gathered her close, rocking her like a child while she wept for everything she had endured and everything she had lost. Tahatan stood to leave, giving her privacy for her grief, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Thank you. For seeing me. Not what he made me, but me." He turned back, meeting her gaze. "I see a woman who survived a monster and a river in the same week. That is no small thing." After he left, Winona continued holding Sarah, humming an old Lakota song about the prairie grass that bends in the storm but never breaks. Sarah didn't understand the words, but she understood the meaning. She cried until she had no tears left, and then, finally, she slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Outside, Tahatan stood in the cool morning air, his mind churning. He had spoken truth to Sarah, but he had not spoken all of it. He had not told her that when she looked at him with those haunted eyes, something in his chest had cracked open. He had not told her that he found himself thinking about her when he should be focused on his duties. He had not told her that, for reasons he could not yet name, her survival felt tied to his own. These were dangerous thoughts for a chief. But as the sun climbed higher, Tahatan knew with absolute certainty that his life had changed the moment he pulled Sarah from the river. The question was whether that change would destroy them both or save them. 2 weeks passed, and Sarah grew stronger. Her bruises faded from purple to yellow-green, her ribs stopped aching with every breath, and the cuts on her wrists healed into pale pink lines. But the deepest wounds, the ones nobody could see, remained raw and tender. Winona proved to be a patient teacher. She showed Sarah how to identify healing herbs, how to prepare them, how to read the land for signs of changing weather. Sarah absorbed everything with desperate intensity, as if learning these skills might somehow anchor her to this new reality. For the first time in her adult life, knowledge was offered freely, without punishment for mistakes or mockery for questions. The Lakota people treated her with careful courtesy. Some were curious, others wary, but none were cruel. Children stared openly until their mothers scolded them, then approached with shy offerings, a smooth river stone, a pretty feather, a strip of dried meat. Sarah accepted each gift with trembling gratitude, overwhelmed by simple kindness from strangers. Tahatan maintained a respectful distance, but Sarah felt his presence like heat from a fire. He would appear at the healer's teepee with fresh game for the cooking pot or rare herbs Winona had mentioned needing. He never lingered, never pressed for conversation, but his eyes asked questions his mouth never voiced. "Are you well? Are you safe? Do you need anything?" Sarah found herself watching for him, listening for his distinctive footsteps. The realization terrified her. She had sworn to never need a man again, to never give anyone that kind of power over her. Yet there was something different about Tahatan. He offered presence without possession, strength without domination. It confused her battered heart. One morning, Winona declared Sarah well enough to venture outside. "You cannot heal in shadows," the old woman said in Lakota, gesturing expansively. Sarah didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. The sun felt impossibly bright after weeks in the dim teepee. Sarah stood blinking like a newborn thing, taking in the camp properly for the first time. Dozens of lodges spread across the river valley, smoke rising from cooking fires, horses grazing on the hillside. People moved with purpose and ease, their lives continuing in patterns as old as the land itself. A group of women were working hides near the water, scraping and stretching the leather with practiced efficiency. When they saw Sarah, they exchanged glances. Then one, a woman perhaps Sarah's age with kind eyes and a round belly suggesting pregnancy, gestured for her to approach. Sarah hesitated, looking back at Winona, who nodded encouragingly. Heart pounding, Sarah walked toward the women on legs that felt weak as willow branches. The pregnant woman pointed to herself. "Zitkala," she said slowly, then pointed to Sarah with a questioning expression. "Sarah," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. Zitkala smiled and handed Sarah a scraping tool, demonstrating the motion. The other women made space, including her in their circle without fanfare. Sarah's eyes burned with unexpected tears. These women asked nothing of her but her presence and effort. No perfection. No servitude. Just companionship and shared labor. She worked clumsily at first, her soft hands unused to such tasks. The women didn't mock her fumbling. Instead, they corrected her grip gently, showed her the proper angle, nodded approval when she got it right. When her hands cramped and blistered, they gave her a break without judgment. Tahatan found them there at midday. He had been hunting since dawn, and 3 rabbits hung from his belt. He paused on the hillside, watching Sarah work among the women. She was laughing at something Zitkala had said, or tried to say with gestures, and the sound struck him like an arrow to the chest. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. The sound was rusty and uncertain, as if she had forgotten how and was relearning. But it was genuine. Real. Beautiful. One of the women noticed him and called out a greeting. Sarah looked up, and their eyes met across the distance. Color flooded her cheeks, and she quickly looked away, but not before Tahatan saw something flicker across her face. Not fear. Not quite trust. But something closer to it. That evening, as the camp settled for the night, Tahatan found himself drawn once again to Winona's teepee. Sarah was sitting outside, watching the sun set over the prairie. She had been crying, he could see the tracks on her cheeks, but these tears seemed different somehow. Softer. "May I sit?" he asked in English. Sarah nodded, and Tahatan lowered himself to the ground beside her, maintaining proper distance. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to crimson to deep purple. "Your people are kind," Sarah said eventually. "I don't understand why." "Kindness needs no reason," Tahatan replied. "It is simply the right way to be." Sarah absorbed this, turning it over in her mind like a strange new object. "My husband said kindness was weakness. That the strong take what they want and the weak suffer. That's how the world works." "Your husband was wrong about many things," Tahatan said quietly. "The strongest tree in the forest is strong because its roots run deep and its branches shelter many birds. Strength that stands alone falls in the first storm." Sarah looked at him then, really looked at him. "Why do you care what happens to me?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Tahatan could have offered a dozen safe answers. Instead, he chose truth. Because when I pulled you from that river, I saw someone fighting to live despite having every reason to die. That kind of strength is rare. It deserves to be honored, not wasted. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. And because when I look at you, I see someone I could have been if different choices had been made. Broken but not defeated. Battered but not destroyed. There is courage in surviving, Sarah. More courage than you know. Something broke open inside her at his words. For so long, she had believed survival was cowardice, that a truly strong woman would have found a way to escape or would have died trying. But Tahatan offered a different story. One where simply continuing to breathe was an act of defiance. One where her scars were proof of strength, not weakness. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of what? Of hope. It hurts worse than despair. Tahatan nodded slowly. Hope is dangerous. But so is living without it. We all must choose our dangers, Sarah. Choose the ones that let you grow, not the ones that keep you small. Spring arrived early that year, bringing warmth that coaxed new grass from the thawing earth. Sarah had been with the Lakota for 6 weeks, and the transformation was remarkable. Her body had healed, flesh filling out where starvation had carved hollows. Her hands grew calloused from work. Her skin bronzed under the prairie sun. But the greatest change was internal, visible only in the way she now held herself, straighter, surer, less like an apology and more like a person who had earned her place in the world. She had learned enough Lakota to communicate basic needs and ideas, though fluency remained elusive. The language felt strange in her mouth, full of sounds English never made, but she persisted. Words were power, and she craved that power like a drowning woman craves air. Tahatan watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction and growing complications. He had told himself his interest in Sarah was merely protective, the natural concern of a chief for someone under his care. But that lie grew harder to maintain with each passing day. He noticed everything about her. The way she braided her hair in the morning, fingers moving with increasing confidence. The way she hummed while working, small sounds of contentment that suggested healing deeper than flesh. The way her eyes sought him in a crowd, then darted away when she realized she'd been caught looking. The way his name sounded in her voice, careful and soft, like something precious. The problem was precedent. Or rather, the lack of it. Tahatan's people had no prohibition against taking a white woman as a wife. Several men in neighboring bands had done so, but he was chief. His choices carried weight beyond personal desire. His first wife had died in childbirth 10 years prior, along with the son she tried to bring into the world. He had not remarried, citing duties that left no time for family. In truth, grief had made him cautious. Love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. Sarah represented both promise and peril. If he claimed her, it would cause talk. Some would approve, others would question. But if he did nothing, if he let her heal and then sent her away, he would lose something he was only beginning to understand he wanted. Needed, even. The crisis came on a warm afternoon when Sarah accompanied a group of women to gather wild onions in the river valley. They were laughing and talking, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company, when riders appeared on the ridge. White men. 6 of them, armed and hard-eyed. Sarah froze. Even from a distance, she recognized the lead rider. Thomas. Her husband. Alive and hunting her still. The women reacted instantly, forming a protective circle around Sarah even though most of them were unarmed. Zitkala, now heavily pregnant, stood at the front, her jaws set with fierce determination. Thomas and his men rode down slowly, confidently, men who expected compliance from women. When they got close enough, Thomas's eyes locked onto Sarah, and his smile was the cruelest thing she had ever seen. "Hello, wife," he drawled. "Thought I'd seen the last of you, did you? Thought you could run off and live with these savages." He spat the last word like poison. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 5 years of conditioning slammed back into her body like a physical blow. She was 6 years old again, being beaten by her father. 16 and sold into marriage to a man twice her age. 23 and broken in 1,000 invisible ways. Thomas dismounted and walked toward her, his men following. "You're coming home. Now. And when we get there, you're going to learn what happens to whores who abandon their husbands." Zitkala stepped between them, speaking rapid Lakota that needed no translation. Thomas shoved her aside roughly, and she stumbled, nearly falling. That finally broke Sarah's paralysis. "Don't touch her." The words came out in a scream, raw and furious. "You want to hurt someone? Hurt me. Leave them alone." Thomas's hand shot out, grabbing Sarah's arm in a grip that bruised instantly. "Oh, I'll hurt you, wife. But first, you're going to watch what happens to these red savages who hid you from your lawful husband." He never finished the threat. Tahatan appeared like summer lightning, moving so fast Thomas barely registered the motion before he was on his back, the chief's knife at his throat. "You will remove your hands from her," Tahatan said in perfect English, his voice cold as winter ice. "And you will leave. Now." The other white men raised their rifles, but they found themselves immediately surrounded by Lakota warriors who had appeared from the hillside, arrows nocked and ready. Thomas's men were outnumbered 3-1, and they knew it. "That's my wife." Thomas sputtered. "Legal and proper. You can't keep her." "She is not property to be kept or claimed," Tahatan replied. "She is a person who chose to stay. You have no authority here." "I have the authority of law. White man's law. Your law does not live here." Tahatan pressed the knife harder, drawing a thin line of blood. "And even if it did, what law says a man can beat his wife until she wishes for death? What law says he can tie her hands and throw her in a river to drown? What law protects a monster who wears the face of a man?" Thomas's eyes widened. He hadn't expected witnesses. Hadn't expected to be called to account. Men like him never did. "Sarah," Tahatan said, not taking his eyes off Thomas. "Do you wish to go with this man?" Every person present held their breath. This was the moment that mattered. Not Tahatan's knife or his warrior's arrows, but Sarah's choice. Her voice. Her power. Sarah looked at Thomas, really looked at him. She saw the man who had stolen 5 years of her life. Who had convinced her that suffering was love, that pain was her natural state. Who had tried to murder her when she finally found the courage to leave. Then she looked at Tahatan. She saw the man who had pulled her from death without asking for anything in return. Who had given her space to heal. Who had shown her that strength could be gentle and power could be kind. Who had offered her something she had never believed possible, choice. "No," she said, and her voice did not shake. "I will never go with him. I would rather die." "You heard her," Tahatan told Thomas. "Ride away while you still can." Thomas struggled, but Tahatan's grip was iron. "This isn't over. She's my wife. I'll bring the law down on you. I'll bring soldiers." "Bring what you want," Tahatan replied, releasing him with a shove. "But know this, if you return, you will not leave. Her life for yours. Choose wisely." The white men mounted quickly, Thomas red-faced and raging. As they rode away, he turned in his saddle, pointing at Sarah. "You're nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing." Sarah stood straight and tall, flanked by Lakota women who had become her friends and protected by warriors who had become her people. She said nothing, because Thomas was wrong and they both knew it. She was everything she had always been, finally free to become it. When the riders disappeared over the ridge, Sarah's legs gave out. Tahatan caught her, and she clung to him, shaking with reaction. "He'll come back," she whispered. "He always comes back." "Let him try," Tahatan replied. "He will find he is not hunting a helpless woman anymore. He is hunting a chief's protected guest. And that is a very different thing." But even as he spoke the words, Tahatan knew they were inadequate. Protected guest. The term felt hollow, insufficient for what Sarah had become to him. That night, he would have to make a decision. For her sake. For his own. For both their futures. That night, the council met in Tahatan's lodge, the fire casting long shadows on the hide walls. The matter before them was unprecedented and potentially dangerous. A white woman, pursued by a violent husband who claimed legal ownership, protected by a chief whose interest appeared to go beyond simple hospitality. Grey Wolf, the eldest warrior, spoke first. "We all saw what happened today. That white man will not accept defeat. He will return, and likely with others. Soldiers, perhaps. His kind always brings soldiers when they want something from us." "Let him bring soldiers," a younger warrior named Red Sky growled. "We have faced worse." "Have we?" Grey Wolf asked quietly. "We have fought for our hunting grounds, for our way of life. But never for one white woman. Is she worth risking everything?" Tahatan listened as his council debated, tradition requiring him to hear all voices before making his own position known. Some argued for sending Sarah away, letting her be someone else's problem. Others suggested negotiating with Thomas, perhaps offering horses to satisfy his wounded pride. A few voiced support for keeping her, citing the moral obligation to protect those who sought shelter. Finally, Winona spoke. The old healer rarely attended council meetings, but she had asked permission tonight, and Tahatan had granted it. You speak of risk and obligation in politics, she said, her weathered voice cutting through the debate. But you dance around the truth like young boys afraid to approach a pretty girl. She fixed Tahatan with a knowing look. Your chief wants this woman. Not as guest. Not as obligation. As his woman. As his wife. Why do we pretend otherwise? Silence fell over the council. Tahatan felt every eye on him, waiting for denial or confirmation. He could have deflected. Could have hidden behind duty and propriety. Instead, he chose the same honesty he had offered Sarah from the beginning. Winona speaks truth, he admitted. I want Sarah to stay. Not because of obligation, but because when I look at her, I see someone who makes me remember why life is worth living. She has survived more than most warriors face in battle. She has rebuilt herself from broken pieces into something stronger than before. That strength draws me. Her courage inspires me. Her presence makes me better than I am alone. He paused, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. But I am chief before I am a man. If keeping her puts our people in danger, I will send her away. If protecting her means bringing soldiers to our doorstep, I will choose our children's safety over my own desires. That is the burden of leadership. I know this. Grey Wolf studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed, a deep rumbling sound that transformed his stern face. Finally. 20 years I have known you, Tahatan, and this is the first time I have heard you speak of wanting something for yourself, not for the tribe. He looked around at the other council members. Do you see? Our chief has been alone so long, he has forgotten how to simply be human. Red Sky nodded agreement. The white man today was a coward and a fool. Such men are dangerous, yes, but predictable. He will return with others, trying to prove his power. But we have faced far worse than that. And we do not abandon our own simply because others threaten. Our own? Someone questioned. She is white. She works beside our women, Zitkala's father, Running Deer, interjected. She tends our sick. She shares our food and fire. She stood against her own people to protect my pregnant daughter today. Tell me again how she is not one of us. The debate continued, but the tone had shifted. They discussed strategies for handling Thomas if he returned, contingency plans for dealing with soldiers, ways to strengthen alliances with other bands. Through it all, one thing became clear, the council supported their chief. Not because they had to, but because they believed in him. Finally, Grey Wolf spoke the consensus. Keep your woman, Tahatan. Court her properly. Offer marriage if she will have you. But do not wait too long. That white man will not give up easily, and legal marriage under our customs will strengthen her position. She will be Lakota then, no matter what his white laws say. The council ended, and Tahatan emerged into the cool night air with his heart pounding. He had their blessing. Now he needed Sarah's. He found her sitting by the river, the same spot where he had pulled her from the water 8 weeks prior. She was staring at the current, her expression unreadable. I wondered if you would come, she said without turning around. You knew I was here. I always know. She finally looked at him, and the moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks. They're going to make me leave, aren't they? I'm too much trouble. No. Tahatan sat beside her. They want you to stay. If you want to stay. Sarah's breath caught. I want to. More than anything. But Thomas won't stop. He'll bring more men, cause more problems. I should go before. Marry me. The words hung between them, stark and sudden. Sarah stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. What? Marry me, Tahatan repeated, his voice steady despite his racing heart. By Lakota custom, as my wife. Thomas will have no legal claim on you then. You will be protected not just as a guest, but as one of us. As my partner. As chosen family. You can't possibly want to marry me, Sarah whispered. I'm broken. Damaged. I have nothing to offer you but trouble. You are not broken, Tahatan said fiercely. You are a woman who survived the unsurvivable. Who learned to laugh again after forgetting how. Who stood up to the man who tried to destroy her and chose life over fear. That is not broken, Sarah. That is magnificent. But what about you? What about your people? I'll bring danger to your door. Danger was already at our door the moment white settlers decided this land was theirs to take. You are not the cause of that. You are simply one person caught in the middle of it, same as us. He took her hand carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. I am not offering marriage out of pity or obligation. I am offering because when I imagine my future, you are in it. When I think about growing old, I see us sitting together watching sunsets. When I picture happiness, it wears your face. Sarah's tears fell faster now. I loved someone once. Or thought I did. He turned that love into chains. I don't know if I can trust myself to choose wisely. Then don't choose with trust, Tahatan suggested. Choose with hope. Choose with possibility. Choose with the knowledge that what we might build together is worth the risk of failing. You taught me that, Sarah. When you clawed your way back from that river, you taught me that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds are impossible. Sarah turned to him fully, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden cruelty. She found only patience and wanting and genuine care. This man had saved her life and asked for nothing. Had protected her and expected no payment. Had seen her at her absolute worst and still looked at her like she was precious. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Tahatan smiled, and it transformed his whole face. He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. We will face whatever comes together then. Thomas. Soldiers. Whatever the future brings. As partners. As equals. As family. 3 days later, they married under the open sky, surrounded by the people who had become Sarah's tribe. She wore a doeskin dress decorated with beadwork that the women had stayed up nights creating. Tahatan wore his finest ceremonial clothes. Winona officiated, speaking the old words that bound 2 lives into one shared path. When Thomas returned a month later with a federal marshal and threats of violence, he found not a cowering runaway wife but a Lakota woman standing beside her chief husband, surrounded by people who would die before letting her be taken. The marshal, seeing the situation and having no jurisdiction on tribal lands, suggested Thomas accept his loss and move on. Thomas raged and threatened lawsuits and demanded justice. He got none of it. Sometimes the river takes and sometimes the river gives. Thomas had tried to make Sarah into nothing. The river had returned her to the world as something new. Something strong. Something free. Years later, visitors would hear the story of the white woman who nearly drowned and the chief who pulled her from the water. They would hear how she learned to be Lakota. How she bore 3 children who walked between worlds. How she became a bridge between peoples, teaching both sides to see each other as human. But the story Tahatan and Sarah told their children was simpler. It was about choosing hope over despair. About finding love in the least expected places. About 2 broken people who healed each other by daring to be vulnerable. About how the end of one story can be the beginning of another, better one. And how sometimes, when you're drowning, the river itself reaches out and saves you.